Okay, Zok Tehillah Gemara. So we were discussing when a woman is believed to say that her husband died, and when we are afraid that she's not consciously lying, but she assumes he died, but he really didn't die. So the last thing we discussed is dever. So dever is 3 lines from the bottom on Daf Kuf Yudalid on the base. So what if she claims that he died because there was a Magefa? So that's a machlokes. Amri la harehu kamochama. There are those who say it's like a mochama, and therefore she's not believed unless she's very specific about describing his death. Like the Gemara said earlier, if she said meis al mitasai and not meis b'mochama, then she's believed even in a mochama. But Amri la ain't a mochama, and there are those who say that it's not like a mochama, and she can be believed. Amri la harehu kamochama. The Amri b'didami, because even though she doesn't see him die because of the dever, she'll assume if everybody else dies, he's going to die with everybody else. There are those who say no, it's not like a mochama, because no one assumes that just because people are dying from sickness, that everyone will die from sickness. Because when it comes to that, people have a different attitude. The Samchi Adamri Inchi, we rely on what people say. Shev Shnin have a musna. 7 years there was a dever. The inish below shni loyal, and someone whose time isn't up doesn't go. Is that how the article touches it? If his time's not up, he's not going to go. So therefore, she's not going to mistakenly assume that her husband died. So what did we discuss until now? If there was a mochama, so whatever region she is in, there's a mochama. There's the attitude that it's bididami. Even if she doesn't see her husband get killed, she'll assume he was killed. And the Gemara gets very specific earlier. The Gemara says that even if she saw that her husband was pierced by an arrow or impaled by a spear, even then she might say he died. He was already sucked into the mochama, but the fact of the matter is, if she didn't see him die, it's possible that a medic came and saved his life. So bididami means not out of the blue. Even if she sees something, but she doesn't actually see him die, it is for bididami. So frankly, what if nobody knew that there was a war in her region? And therefore, she could have just come along and said that my husband died, and nobody would have questioned her at all. But what happened is she came and said, there was a war in the region that we were in, and my husband died because of the war. So, what is Allah? Do we say she's believed because she has a migui? She didn't have to lie. If she wanted to convince everybody that her husband died, all she had to say was, Shalom Ba'alam. She could have just said that there's Shalom Ba'alam, and then she would have been believed. Or maybe keeping the ichsika, once the fact of the matter is, once she tells us that there was a war, so we can no longer trust her. Amr b'didami. She might say that he died when she only assumes he died. He has a cheskas alive. She has a cheskas eshishish. And maybe the mali l'shaker will not dent, will not overrule his chazakas chai and her cheskas eshishish, now that we know that there is, in fact, a war. So Rashi has a myriad kasha here. So let's see Rashi. The boy amra shalom ba'olam umehemna. She would be believed if she just came along, didn't tell us anything about a war, and just told us that her husband died. Of course, she would be believed. So hashtanami, that she told us there's a war, mehemna shall be believed. Here you cannot use the tool of this migun. The ihi gufa loy mechavna l'shkurei. She is not trying to lie. When she comes along and says that he died b'didami, she's not trying to lie. She really thinks he died. She saw him speared. She saw him with an arrow. She saw him dying. So she's not trying to lie. So you only have a kind of mali l'shaker, this migui, if we're choshed that you're lying. Here we're not choshed that you're lying. Here we're choshed that you made a wrong assessment. Alakivan the ischazak milchama, once she told us, and now we've accepted from her that there was a Muhammad, Amr b'Dadami, Usvirihi Shemeis. So now Rashi is a murder kasha. Because if you remember, we said earlier that when do we say a woman will make a wrong assessment? That's if she claims he died. I saw that he was speared. I saw that he was punctured with a spear. So that's where she's not believed. But if she says, even in a Shas Mokama, if she says Meis al Mitase, he died of natural causes, there we believe her. So Frekt Rashi, the Kasha Tivshit Lemi Masnisin. We can be poished this Shaila from our very mission. The Katani Shalom Ba'ilam Namenes. It says that when there's Shalom Ba'ilam, she's Namenes. The Havadai Meis Baili B'Muchamakam. What type of death are we referring to when the Mishnah says if there's Shalom Ba'ilam, the woman is Namenes? It can't be speaking about a natural death, because by a natural death, even if there's Muhammad Ba'ilam, she's believed. Because we said that even if there's a Muhammad Ba'ilam, if she says Meis al Mitasoi, she's believed. She's only not believed to say that he died by Muhammad. So it must be that when there's Shalom Ba'ilam, she's even managed to say he died by Muhammad. The I al Mitasoi, if she's only managed to say Meis al Mitasoi in a case where Shalom Ba'ilam, my area Shalom Ba'ilam. What's up with the Shalom Ba'ilam? Afilu Muhammad Ba'ilam, even if there's a Muhammad Ba'ilam, Amra ill. We said in the Gemara earlier, he Amra Meis al Mitasim Hemna. Even if there's an active war going along, the only time we don't believe her to be mad to her is if she said my husband died in the war, because maybe she's only assuming that. But if she said Meis al Mitasoi, Avada she's believed. So Ayvazoi, Bizman Shalom Ba'ilam, she must be the menace to say that he died in Bil Muhammad. So that's exactly what our shaila is, that he died by Muhammad. And she's the one who told us about the Muhammad. Alavade Meis bil Muhammad Itrich Lashminan. When our Mishnah tells us that B'Shas Shalom, she's believed to say that her husband died, it must mean that she's believed to say that her husband died even bil Muhammad, which means she's telling us that there's a Muhammad, which is exactly the shaila of our Gemara. Hainu Hichziki Himel Chamabayla. That's exactly the case of our shaila here in the Gemara. Zok Rashi Tritz, I can answer you that it's not a kasha. Because Masnizin the Amra Meis Stama. In our Mishnah, she said Meis Stama, and we don't ask her for details. She says her husband died. They don't ask her to repeat the nitty-gritty details of his death. She just said that he died. Our Mishnah tells us the Hayol v'Shalom Ba'ilam, since it's a peaceful time, even if she didn't specify that he died a natural death, she just said he died. We will assume she meant that it was a natural death, and we don't cross question her about it. We accept her testimony without asking for details. That's if it's a time of peace. But where there's a war in the world, then if she comes from a war-torn region and she says my husband died, she probably means he died due to the war. Thank you very much. He died because of the war. Ad the amra meis al mitasai. Unless she specifies, even though there was a war, my husband wasn't killed in the war. My husband died naturally during the wartime. So therefore, so the question that we're stick handling over here of if she's Nemenis, if she's the one who tells us that there was a war, it's going to Yeshalom Bailam, V'amr ihi meis b'milchama, and she said meis b'milchama. So that's beautiful. The shaila that we have is in fact not the case in the Mishnah, because in the case of the Mishnah, she never said meis b'milchama. She said meis stama, and since it's peacetime, we don't ask for details. But here, she gave details even though we didn't ask, and she said meis b'milchama. And therefore, we doubt her testimony because maybe she didn't really see him die. Zaktamar Toshma. Let us see what the Bryces can teach us. Ishinu Olenu Bayis. We were in a house, and suddenly the house went on fire. Hitzisu Be'esh. It was full of fire. V'nismali Asham. It was full of smoke. V'ani Barachti. I got out of there. V'hu Nisha Shalom Meis. My husband, I guess he didn't make it out. She got out, And after they did roll call, after they were out of the building, her husband was nowhere to be found. Or Ishinu Alanu Myra, or the same thing occurred in the cave. Who makes he died? So there ain't in a menace. There she's not believed. So this is exactly that case, Dr. Rashi. She's the one who told us about the smoke. She could have just said my husband died. She told us no, there was a fire, and that's what happened. The Katani ain't in a menace. And we see she's not believed. We don't say we should believe her because she didn't even have to tell us about the fire. She could have told us that my husband died. There it's much worse. Why she's not a menace? So Amar Law, we will tell her, just like you had a nace and you were able to escape, maybe he also had a nace. Because all she said is that I got out of the fire, he didn't. And they can ask her right back, how do you know? How do you know he didn't get out of the fire? Did you see a body? No, you just didn't see him. That's not a raya, and therefore this is even worse. Okay. Tashma. Naflu aleinu avdekacham. We were attacked by a band of goyim. We were attacked by a band of goyim. Naflu aleinu listim. We were attacked by a band of robbers. Who mace? He died. V'nitzalti, and I was saved. So there she's the menace. So once again, why don't you say Bididami, Elamai, because Vibal, she has the Migu, she's the menace. Zok to Gemara, Hasam Kidiravidi. So Amar Ravidi, Isha Klezaina Aleha. There she's believed. Why? Because she was saved because a woman is normally not murdered when she's attacked by robbers. They want to keep her to take advantage of her. I'm sorry? Yeah. She's always weaponed. In other words, she will generally not be killed by the advancing robbers.
Like every pogrom, it's like everything that happened in Russia. Every other day there was another pogrom. Meaning this case of this.
Yes,
why can't we say that the reason why she says those migus and it's not a migu, meaning the reason why she says the story and it's not a real, doesn't have the price of a migu, because this is public events. This is stuff that everybody knows.
No, we're talking about things that nobody knows. That's all right. There was no internet in those days. If she comes from some faraway land and tells us there's a Muhammad there, we would have had no way of knowing otherwise.
That's the idea. She's coming from the pogrom, but she's coming far away.
So let's see Rashi. Let's see Rashi Shiny Hustle. I didn't see Rashi earlier, but it's a Geshmaka Rashi on the case of if she said got full of smoke and I got out, she's not in the menace to say her husband died. Dachi Kamer, this is what she said. The Chishan is Smale Ashon, when the house was full of smoke, Baruch she ran away. She's admitting I didn't see him die. I got out and he didn't. And if it's Ashon, in other words, how could he possibly survive? He was engulfed in smoke. They'll tell her, you got out even though you were engulfed in smoke. Maybe he did as well. But in the case of Mulchama, where she's telling us there's a Mulchama and her husband died with Mulchama, there will say that maybe she would not have said that he died unless she actually saw that he died. If she wanted to lie and tell us that she saw him die, although she really didn't, she never even had to tell us that it was a Muhammad. So that's why she should be believed. Okay, in this case, she's also the one who told us that we were attacked by Goyim. Otherwise, we would never have known. Nevertheless, she's the man saying that he got killed. So in the case of Mulchama, even the Mulchama Tanahi, not in the case of Mulchama, in the case where she said she was attacked by robbers, in essence, what is it? It's a miniature war. She was there with him, and therefore, she would not have said she thinks that he died, she would actually have seen him die. Ela natra b'chazila, the miss. In a regular mechama, she can't wait. If her husband was just stabbed with an arrow or a spear, she's abandoning him. Why would you be abandoning him? He's dying. The teretz is she's abandoning because she's running for her life. And she knows that if she stays any longer, she can get killed. But in this case, where she was attacked by a band of robbers, she's in no rush to leave. She's not afraid that they're going to kill her as well. You know why? The Isha like Mustafim and Listam. She's not afraid of them. She knows she's not getting killed. So she will actually not be afraid of them. And therefore, she'll stay around and be there with her husband until he actually died. And we're not afraid that she said he died, even though she didn't actually see him die. So that's why that's not a right either. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. Now we're getting into some interesting cases over here. Zakta Heilig Gemara weiter. It's a little bit graphic. It's a little bit graphic. It's not for the faint of stomach, but we'll have to get through this. Zakta Gemara. Hahu Gavra. There was a gentleman. The Bishili Hilule. At the end of his own wedding, Itli Nura Beginani. The wedding hall went on fire. Amalu Devisu, his wife announced because she saw that her husband got caught on fire and she panicked and she said, Chazug Roy. Look, people, my husband's on fire. We gotta rescue. Also they came. Chazug Harucha. They saw Rachman al a burnt body that was unrecognizable. I guess they didn't know how to analyze dental records in those days. Chazu Gavra Charucha, the Shadi, that was lying there on the floor. Upasta the Yoda, the Shadi. And there was also an additional hand. So obviously there was somebody else there who lost his hand. Sabar Reb Chia bar Avin Lemeimar. Reb Chia bar Avin wanted to say, Hainu Ishinu Aleinu Bayis. Ishinu Aleinu Mayra, where the halacha is, we can't confirm that this is her husband, and therefore we cannot be mad at her. Amar Rava said, Midami. What's the comparison between this case and Ishinu Aleinu Mayra, Ishinu Aleinu Bayis? Hasam like Amar Chazug Avroi. In the case of Ishinu, she doesn't see him. She never saw him on fire. She just assumed that since he was in a smoke-filled house, he didn't get out. When in fact she did get out. So maybe he got out too. Ma'ashakin here, she actually saw him on fire. Ba'oi, Gavra Charucha, the Shadi, who passed to the other Shadi. She also sees that there's a corpse here. So she saw her husband, Rachman al-Islam, caught on fire, and now she sees a burnt corpse. It's unrecognizable. So it's everything is very noita to the fact that her husband died. So the question is, what shot in Reb Chia bar Avin who wanted to answer her? Sorry?
There's more of a reason to believe that.
That's right. Exactly. So the question is, why would Reb Chia bar Avin not believe her? Reb Chia bar Avin wanted to not believe her.
Not like over there, then she's not in it.
There she's not in the minutes. By Ishinu, she's not in the minutes.
That's where the problem.
No, we're talking about Ishinu. He said, Hainu Ishinu Aleinu Bayis Ishinu Aleinu Mayra. In that case, she's not believed because all she's saying is that he got stuck in the smoke. She never saw him on fire. So the Gemara is going to ask, why would Reb Chia want to ask her? This is much better. She saw her husband on fire, right? So the Gemara of Reb Chia bar Avin, Gaver Charucha, the Shadi, that burnt person that's lying there, who said that's her husband? Ema Ina Shachrina, also Latule. Maybe somebody else came to save her husband, Vachalte Nura, and the other person, the rescuer, got totally burnt, and her husband lost his hand. Who passed the other, the Shadi Nura, Italia, the Yalad Bamuma. Her husband's hand got on fire, got burnt, and he lost his hand. Imagine a chassan the night of his wedding, he lost his hand. Umachmas Kisufa. He was so embarrassed that he lost his hand that he skipped down. He ran away. He couldn't face people. So maybe, in fact, her husband is the one who only lost his hand, and her husband is still alive. And that's why Reb Chia bar Avin didn't want to be matter. Normally, we said that if an Eid Echad comes and says that someone died, we believe him, and therefore we will marry off his wife. Of course, this is for Vishudak Mitzvah. Which Rashi are you looking at? Right, that's why we're matter. We're matter because we say that the body is his and the hand is the hand of someone who comes to try to save him. But Mashenken the maskana the maskana, we assume that it's her husband's hand. So when you're reading the word pasta yada, I don't know if that's the last pasta the yada. That's probably the earlier pasta the yada. What is the arch? How does the arch quotation?
But you're right. I was assume that way.
Art Scroll brings the Tosos Arash on Rash, explaining Rashi that the hand is also a rescuer, and that if a person loses their hand, they're not going to survive. There's two rescuers. The husband got some kind of injury and then fled.
Aha. Oh, so I understood that he lost. The injury was that he lost his hand. But the article saying the Russians could be there's a third person involved as well.
Yeah, the Tosos Rosh explains Rashi. Once the fire takes hold of a person to the point that it severs his hands, it's impossible for him to survive. Accordingly, if either the corpse or the hand were the husband's, the wife would be permitted to remarry. Rashi therefore found it necessary to explain that Rav Chia bar Avin, who forbids the wife to remarry, considers that both the charred corpse and the severed hand might belong to the rescuer, and the blemish that caused the husband to run away was not the severing of the arm, but some other disfiguring wound.
Why does you Dafka want to say that? What's wrong with learning that the hand can belong to the husband?
The Rivan and Ritva, however, argue with Rashi and maintain that once the one whose hand is severed by the fire can survive, and explain Rav Chia bar Avin's reply to mean that we're concerned the charred corpse is that of the rescuer and the severed hand is the husband. That's like what you said, who survived and lost his hand, ran away because of embarrassment and disfigurement.
Okay,
That's
the reason why he doesn't learn like that, because he feels that it's not survivable.
Okay, go on.
From the fact that Rav Chia bar Avin finds it necessary to suggest a motive for why the husband might run away, the Noda Yehuda infers in the absence of such a motive, we would not posit the husband ran away, but we would rather apply the principle that one is presumed to have remained in place he is known to have been. Kan nimsa kan haya. Some sofer, however, suggests that it's only in the present case of a newlywed that we must account for why the groom would have abandoned his bride during the wedding celebration.
I hear. Very interesting. So basically, her husband was on fire. She said, I need a hand, and she got a hand. Okay, I hear. What would be the halacha if an Eid Echad came and said someone died b'mulchama? We know an Eid Echad who said someone died is believed. But what about if he says b'mulchama? Now, time of Eid Echad mehemen. Why is Eid Echad mehemen? Is the reason because mishum de milsa davida ligluihu. If the man is alive, it's going to become clear that he's alive, and this Eid Echad is going to be exposed as a fraud, and therefore, like mishaker, you don't lie when you know you could be caught unless you're a politician. Hachanami le mishaker. So too, this Eid Echad wouldn't lie. Oy dilma time of Eid Echad mishum de he gufa daikum. The namanas of Eid Echad is because we're relying on the woman to be extra medayik. But even the zimnin the sunny, since it happens sometimes that a woman might be incentivized to want to make her husband disappear, loy daikum mitzvah. She will not be daikum mitzvah. So therefore, there's no namanas over here, and we wouldn't be able to marry her off. When they went in Nardah to be Ma'abed Shana, and tells you there's a whole tumult about it. Ibn Shana has told me that in Eretz Yisrael, so why was he going out of Eretz Yisrael? So she says maybe it's because there were no Chachamim there in Eretz Yisrael as big as the Chachamim in Nardah, so that's why it had to be done in Nardah. But there could be some other reason why they have to go out. Anyway, because you're right, I met Reb Nechemia from Beis Dli, and he told me, Shamati, I heard, I heard that nobody would fear zich in Eretz Yisrael to marry off a woman if there's only an Eid Echad who came along and said that her husband died. Ella Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. It's only Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava who has the shoulders, who has the places to allow a woman in such a case to get married. Menamti loy, and I told him, so Rabbi Kiva says, I told Rabbi Nechemia, Kain hadvar. Kain hadvar. That's true. Nobody would be matter, it only Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Amr Li, so Rabbi Nechemia told me, Emor lahem mishmi, go back home to Eretz Yisrael and tell everybody in my name. Atem yoidim, haMedina hazu mishubeshes begaisos. And you know that this country is full of war and of attacks. This is what I was makabel from a Gamliel Zaken. You could do it. So tell the Olam, it's not only Rabbi Ben Bava, you can proliferate this psak, because Rabbi Gamliel Zaken said, Masiyana Isha Perech.
No, they said Bishmi. So it's from Nehemiah.
Rabbi Nechemia, tell people in my name that I heard this testimony from Rabbi Gamliel Zaken. So everybody could be matter a woman al Perech because Rabbi Gamliel Zaken clearly passed in that way. So the question is, in Rabbi Nechemia's comments to Rabbi Kiva, he threw in some information, and he said, "Atem yoidim haMedina hazu mishubeshes begaisos." Why was Rabbi Nechemia including? All he had to say was, Rabbi Gamliel says you can be matter a woman al peirechot. Vos he had to stick in this geographical information that this neighborhood is full of geisos. So my Medina mishubeshes begaisos. Isn't that part of the psak? That was part of the chiddush. Lav afal gab de mezini du mishubeshes. Even though there's war in this country, nevertheless, kachmu kublani shemesina al meirechad nemen. So this is an answer to our question. Our shaila was is an meirechad nemen b'mulchama. So Rabbi Nechemia is saying we are in a surrounding of mulchama, and even in these surroundings, I was makabel from Rabbi Gamliel Zaken that you can believe in eirechad. So you have a right to our shaila. Amar Rava, Zok Rava, that doesn't make any sense. Is he hachi ma'ishna medina zu? It's kol makom sheyesh kaishos miboyle. He should have said whenever there's a mulchama and they rechad is neman. He said the medina zu. What's happens medina zu? Ela Amar Rava. What he said was completely harmless and had nothing to do with this psak. All he was saying is, Rabbi Kiva, you go tell them in my name. Rabbi Kiva was saying, you go tell them themselves in your name. Why do I have to tell them? Go, Eretz Yisrael, and you can say your own testimony. Why should I go say testimony for you? Because Hachik Omar Atam Yoidim Shemazina Zu Mishubeshes Begaisos will actually the Meshbek in Shibesi Umaisi Kamei Rabbanim. You know how dangerous it is to travel. For me to make that journey to up there to Israel is difficult. So please be my shliach, do it on my behalf. Kach mukublani mirav Gamliel Shemazina Ishal Peirechad, but it has nothing to do with Shas Mulchama. It's Lav Davka b'Shas Mulchama, and therefore you don't have a right to Tarshayim. No, he's going home anyway. He was from there. Rabbi Kiva came for a purpose, and he was going home. Tashma. There are two Talmidei Chacham that were traveling with Abba Yosy ben Simai in a svina. So there's three big Gedolei Adar, B'tova, and the ship sunk. The Heisi Rebbe Nishayseim al Pinoshim. There were women on the ship, or women who witnessed the death of these three people, and they were trusted to be mater the almanas of these three people to get remarried. Frag to Gemara. V'mayim k'mulchama. Mayim is like a mulchama. Mayim is like a mulchama. Why? Rashi says the ikal member be the dummy, right? They saw them go overboard, but they didn't necessarily see them dead. The noshim afilu meya keirechadami, and noshim have the almanas of an eirechad. The katani hisi. So you see clearly that within a almanas of an eirechad, you could be mater, even though it's very possible that they didn't actually see the corpses, they just saw them go overboard. That's exactly like a case of Muhammad. In fact, the more of it, Tizbra, is that so? This water, when a ship sinks in water, usually the water is a big enough body that if you look in all four directions, you cannot see land. And when someone drowns in water where you cannot see land in all four directions, Asura, she would be Asur. Why? Because you don't know if he reached shore, because you can't see shore.
But the reason why you can't be sure is the reason why you say he didn't survive.
But the fact is you need to have verification, right? You know, the hunting laws in Ontario is you cannot shoot the net unless you positively identify what you're shooting as an animal. If you say I shot and I thought it was an animal, you're going to go to jail. Because if you only thought it's an animal and you didn't verify, that's illegal. So what's shot that they believed them? The Amri Askinu Kaman. Askinu Kaman, I think so. I think that's when they made that law. Askinu Kaman, they said that the body were brought up in front of us, v'chazinu, and we actually v'chazinu la'alter, we actually saw the bodies. Right? Tosh says v'chazinu la'alter la'alter shehelim u'namayim. They came out, their bodies were taken out of the water. We saw them right away. Tosh says if the bodies were in the water a long time, ain't lochish, then you can't trust them. The mayim bitz mitzamsi. I'm sorry, Rashi, it's not a problem. I mean, I'm not, in lachish means you probably wouldn't believe them, but I'm not sure. So let's see what it is. The ka'amri simnin. Right. So they're not the bodies themselves might not be recognizable. The bodies themselves might not be recognizable, but they said they were simonim. In other words, they saw things on the body of they saw things on the bodies of these people that were in places that normally you don't know about. Because if everybody knows about it, anyone can make it up, right? Because they saw an area that no one knows. And I'm not sure how the Dayanim must have seen him in the mikveh. How else did the Dayanim know? Right, the lady says the body had a mole face on his back right cheek, right? What? Because the body came up dead without clothing. It was a dead body, right? And then the news said, yeah, you're right. Stimmt.
No, there's only one person, there's two women. They interrogate her them separately. So each one can say the same.
They're just saying the simon.
Right, they don't know. They don't know who the person is. But the Kami Simonim, the lava lies from Chinan. So we're not relying on them. So we don't have to worry about them. The dummy, we're not samich them. Ela Simonim, we're being samich on the simon. Who gavra the apke chumshami gabe chavri. There was a person who had poppy seeds, and he asked his friend to take the pekadon to watch his poppy seeds for him. I guess they were somewhat expensive. Eventually, he came back to collect his poppy seeds. May I have my poppy seeds back? So the Shomer said, what are you talking about? Shakotinu. You've already picked them up last week. You have them already. So the mafkid who's trying to collect, and this Shomer is denying that he has them, he said, what are you talking about? They were exactly 5 pounds, and they were in this specific type of barrel. And that's exactly what you have sitting there. So those have to be mine. Give me my shumshman. Amalei, the Sherman said, I'm sorry. The dach shekel tinu, you had exactly the same items, but you've taken them back already. The honey and these, although they match precisely the specs that you cited, they're different shumshamin, and I bought them, and they belong to me. So how do you deal with this shiloh? So Reb Chisda Meimar, Reb Chisda wanted to say, this is the same case as the Talmidei Chachamim, where we relieve these women to say with simonim that in fact this was the same item. We don't say that even though there's a unique mole on the guy's back right cheek, you don't say, well, maybe somebody else had the same mole, and these are other men. Rather, you are matter these women, and you, because of that unusual feature, you are matter them l'shuk. You assume these people died. So you see, when there's a certain specificity that could have been duplicated elsewhere, you'll still rely on it. So Oibazoi over here too. Why don't we force the Shomer to give back these shumshamin? How can you compare the two? Hasam ka'amri simon. Here, they're giving simonim very unique physical traits. Hacha shumshami. When you're talking about poppy seeds, my simna islahu. What type of simon is there? Udika amar chen v'chein havyon. And if you're telling me the simon is because he was able to pinpoint exactly how much there were, ema chushbani yisrami. Maybe punkt that they had the same amount as he gave them. But who said that's such a big raya? A simon is more specific, is a better raya than just guessing the right amount of beans in the jar. Amalei Markashisha by Rav Chisda Rav Ashi. Umicha Shinon Shema Pinon. So what are you saying? That we have to be choshed that these shumshumin are new shumshumin, and the original shumshumin have already went back to the original owner? Is that really what you're suggesting? We have to be choshed. But now we learned Mata Kli v'chasav kuf. What if you found a kli with pears in it, with wheat kernels, for instance, and it said kuf? So we say that means korban, mean hektish. It means that the person was makdish these wheat kernels, put them in this container, and he put a kuf on them, so we should know it's a korban. What if there's a mem on the container? We'll say it's meiser. What if there's a dalet on the container? We'll say dimua. We'll say it's chulin and truma that were mixed together. What if there's a tes on the container? Teva. What if there's a tough on the container? Truma. Why is that? Shebeshas hasakana hayukosin tough tachas truma. The question might be, why wouldn't you just write truma for truma? Why wouldn't you just write the letter tough? So the Gemara tells us because b'shas hasakana, where you weren't allowed, shegazu shaloi l'kayim mitzvahs, you weren't allowed to do mitzvahs, so they would use code language. Because there's no way in the world the guy would chop that tough might be truma, right? So because of that, that's how they did things in those days. So we assume that. So we're assuming clearly that, sure, at one point someone had put truma into this container that he labeled tough. But how can you assume it's truma? Maybe now the truma that was in there was already gone, and this is new wheat. Now, if you're choshit that you can't assume that what you found in this keli belonged in this keli all the time, maybe once upon a time he put truma into this container, and that's why he wrote a tough on it. But that's long gone, and he just kept on reusing the container, and maybe what's in here now is not truma. Are you taka saying that we're not choshit? Are you suggesting that we're not choshit? Let's look at the seifa. Rabbi Yosy Omer, even if you found a barrel, truma, and it actually says the word truma, still harei eluchulim. We'll still say harei eluchulim. Why? Shani Omer, because I will say, ishtakit have a mole truma. In fact, once upon a time, yesterday, it was full of truma, but upina. He took the truma out. Now there's chulin in there, but he still has the label truma. Why? Because it was once upon a time originally used for truma. Ella, you have to say in this price that you can't bring a raya from. Everybody in this price holds that you are choshid, that the original label is not representative of what's in there now. The original label means once upon a time this was in there, but now it's not necessarily in there. The same way we say by the shomer, just because I have the same amount of shumshumi, lav dafka, does it belong to the mafkid? Maybe the mafkid took the shumshumi back a long time ago, and now I have new shumshumi here. So what's the machlokes over here about the letters on the containers? If in fact you took the truma out of the keli that's labeled tough, or you took the dimua out of the keli that's labeled hadalit, michvar have a copper. He would have erased it. He would have scratched it out. And therefore, you do have a right. This is not stama keli. This is a keli with a label. If someone's going to take product out of a keli that has a certain label and put in other product, the labels will change. He won't leave the same label there. And therefore, the Tanakama holds you can rely on it. So here you say that he didn't swap product because there's a good reason to say so, because there's a label here that he would have otherwise changed. The Idich and Rabbi Yosy holds that no, Amar Ishtali, maybe he forgot. He was in a rush. He changed over. He needed another container, and the only container that he had was mislabeled, so he used it. Inami lefanche shavke. This is a very interesting thing. What does lefanche shavke mean? And this goes back to a shayla that we touched a couple of days ago. Lefanche shavke, Rashi says, la tzalas perish shebesoicha hiniach ba'oiseh. You know why he left the truma on the label? So no one should steal his perish. It's like writing chalav stam on the milk that he didn't want you to take out of the fridge. The lagira, the reason why he didn't take it off, he didn't want someone touching it. So then the shaila is, does he have to? If he wrote truma, is it shavja nafsha chedicha desura? Does he now have to fear with it like the truma? But based on what we learned, the raya from Yitzchak and Rivka that if he has a good reason why he did it, so no one should steal it, then you don't say Shavi Nafshech Chidducha B'Shur. Zok Gemara weiter. Yitzchak Reish Galusa. Yitzchak was a very chosh of a man. He was the Reish Galusa, very famous. Bar Achse, the Rav Bibi Haba. He was the nephew, the son of the sister of Rav Bibi. Haba Ka'azol Mikorteva Laspamia. He was traveling from Korteva to Aspamia. And I don't know where these places are. I assume Aspamia is Spain. Corteva, I don't know where that is.
Cordova.
Isn't Cordova in Spain?
Yeah.
So he went, I guess Aspamia was a city as well in those days. So
It's not clear from the Gemara whether the references to local cities in Babel or the distant areas, Cordova and Spain.
I think somebody needs to develop a ways, but a historical ways from the time of the Gemara. Okay.
Spain was divided into a few kingdoms at the time. So, well, it's known as Spain could just be part of Spain and Cordoba another part of country.
So I just want to know if the rain in Spain is mainly on the plain, how about the rain in Cordova? Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. Okay. Okay. V'shochem, and he died. In the travels he died. Sholchem Hasam, they sent from there Yitzchak Reish Galusa Bar Achte de Rabibi. So they sent a message with some very clear identifiers. During his travel from Kurtava Laspamia, B'Shacham he died. So if Rabbi Yitzchak's wife received such a letter, Bezin received such a letter with very descriptive terms that should only apply to this one man, can we assume that this is the man who died and therefore be matter the wife? Michashinan litrei Yitzchak Eloi. Do you have to be choshed that there's somebody else who might meet this same description? Abaye Amar Chashinan, you have to be concerned that someone meets the same description. Rabbi Malay Chashinan, you could let her get married. Amar Abaye, how do I know that you cannot assume this is the only man? There might be somebody else. Now, who gitted the shtaka for Nahardah? They once found a get in Nahardah. Uchesiv, and it said Bay in the get, B'tzat Klunya Masa Ano, I am in this city called Klunya. What's my name? Andrelinoi Nahardah. I'm Andrelinoi from Nahardah. Patris Visarchis Yas Plonius and Tasi. I released my wife. I'm giving her this get. This is the star that they found. The question is, there's a woman here who wants to say this was the get that I got. I lost it after I got it, but this is my get, and I'm a free woman. Visholcha Avu de Shmuel lekamed Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. Avu de Shmuel encountered this shaila. I guess he wasn't sure what the halacha was, and he sent this shaila to Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. Vishalach lei, and you know what Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya answered? He said, Tivdek Narda Kula. You need to check every single, you got to go through the voter rolls. I don't know if they're accurate or not. You have to go through the voter rolls of Narda to make sure that there's no other person, there's no duplicate ballots. Oh, that causes storm. But you have to go through the voter rolls to make sure that this is the only such person who meets this description, and then you could be matir. So, Frank the Gemara, so this is a raya to Abaye, right? Abaye brought a beautiful raya. So you see, you can't assume, since there's some unique identifiers, that he's the only one. Maybe there's others. But Rava said, no, that's not a raya at all. Because if Rabbi Yehuda really held that you need to be concerned that there's another person who meets this description, Vasap is only boidik in the city of Nadah. Yivda kala olam mibayla. This person could be anywhere in the world who gave to get in this place. So how would it be enough to satisfy your needs, Abaye, to just be boidik in Nadah? Elamai, you don't need to be boidik anywhere. So if you don't need to be boidik anywhere, why in the world would Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya make them be boidik? Ella mishum kavod Avu de Shmuel hu de shalachach. Avu de Shmuel sent them a shaila. It was an amaratis to shaila because he should have been matir the woman right away. Yet, since Avu de Shmuel asked the shaila, Rabbi Yehuda didn't want to macher avek and humiliate Avu de Shmuel, so he said make a bedika. But it wasn't really a bedika that you need to halacha. It was a bedika so that Avu de Shmuel wouldn't look bad. Rava Amar Rava Mina. How do I know, in fact, that you could rely on a pretty specific description? Tani Trey story the Nafka be Mechuza. There were two stories that were in Mechuza, and we weren't sure if they were valid. The Chazabahu Chavi Bar Nanoi V'Nanoi Bar Chavi. Those were the names of the two Malvas in each of the two stories, which were relatively common names. The Agvibahu, and we were the Bezdin allowed them to mon from that. So therefore, you have a raya. Rabbi Bar Avua Zuzi. Rabbi Bar Avua used these stories and allowed people to collect from it. So you see that you're not choshet to somebody else. Yet there's a lot of other people in there. So Zok Rashi, a very interesting point. Even though there's many people with the same name, you still allow these people to collect with the stories. How do I know it's you? Maybe the star belongs to somebody else with the same name. But the Zok Rashi, Magvinon, when one of these people come and pull a star that you owe me money, we'll give you the money based on the star that you hold, and we won't say maybe this is not your star. Maybe your star belongs to a different malva who has the same name as you. You're not afraid that the chavi in the star is not you; it's a different chavi. The chivun de leinin, and this is the key point. The chivun de leinin mamana avagav the hochzaku like hashinot. The gabi mamana, when I'm trying to extract money from somebody else, that somebody else is a muhsik. There's an hamoiti mechaber varaya. So you see, like Gabi mamana, even when Yena has the chazaka, I can still use this star to extract money from him. So therefore, in Isura, when we're trying to free a woman and let her get married, he loy huchzaku. If there's, I didn't touch huchzaku means even if we know there's other men in the city with the same name, we'll still take money out of a muhsik. Why? Because we'll say if this guy is holding this star, chances are he is the guy in the star. Therefore, leading Isura, when we want to be mater a woman, we don't know for sure that there's somebody else in the city with the same name. You just want us to be choshet that maybe there's somebody else in the city with the same name. Therefore, so if by money we allow this star, even though we know for a fact there's other people with the same name, but we trust that since he's holding the star, this is his star. By Yisura, in a case where it's even less of a chance that this is no good, because we don't know that there's any other Yitzchak, Reish Galusa, Ba'achzer Bibi. We don't know that. You just want us to say maybe there is. There for sure we could rely on it because you're not choshed that there's somebody else there if you have no reason to believe so. And that was Rava's Raya, that Avada you could rely on a detailed description and you don't have to assume there's somebody else with the same description. Okay, let's stop here and we'll be mamshuk tomorrow. Why? Oh, I didn't even think of that.
I don't care.
What time should we start tomorrow? Do you want to learn tomorrow at 8, or you want to learn at 6, or you want to learn at? We learn at 6 or we learn at 7. Yeah, what do I want to do? Do you want to learn at 6 or 7? What time is Shachos tomorrow? What time is Shachos tomorrow? What does anybody know what time Shachos is? Are we having a holiday schedule tomorrow? If it's Sunday schedule, so I guess we'll learn tomorrow at 7. Oh, I think you're checking? Oh, I see you looking down over there.
So you want to do poppy seed ploy or?
It doesn't say that it's a holiday schedule, but that
Doesn't
could
say?
just be it could be an oversight. But if it's not a holiday schedule, I'll just learn at the regular time.
So we don't. Okay, so I'll have to find out and then send that on WhatsApp later. So if it's holiday schedule, we'll learn at 7. If not, we'll learn at 6. Okay, well,
All right.
we got it all down pat. Shkoyach Avigdor.
Yeah.